Good morning, all. As we enter into this service, please note that those of you participating via Zoom have been muted by our host, and we ask that in-house participants please remain masked while in the sanctuary. Also, be advised that this service is being recorded and, with the exception of joys and concerns, will be published online. Finally, if you wish, take a moment to arrange your own chalice at home. Let us hold a quiet moment together as our chalice is lit. Let the radiant flame draw from us the words we need to give and to receive. Words of greeting, words of comfort, words of solace, words to challenge our minds, and words to bring us to action. Let us gaze upon this, our common flame, so that we remember who we are and what we can do when we are together. Janet Cooper will light the chalice here in the sanctuary, and I invite you to light your own chalice and place it where it can be seen by all of us. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has a cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lit the flame within us and the community. Thank you, Janet. Before we sing the first hymn, let me remind our remote participants to leave ourselves muted and our in-house participants to remain masked. However, we want you and whoever is with you to sing with Mary and Jan as big and as loud as you'd like. Make it a joyous experience. Please stand if you are able and sing the opening hymn, One More Step, number 167.
One more step, we will say one more step, till every face is us and everyone will take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word, till there is peace insert by everyone will take one more word. One more prayer, we will say one more prayer, till every prayer is shared by everyone will say one more prayer. One more song, we will say one more song, till every song is sung by everyone will say one more song.
Please be seated. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist community of Cambria. We are glad you've joined us today. Our UUCC sanctuary sits on land which the Saline and Chumash indigenous peoples historically inhabited. We honor their contribution to this region and give thanks for the opportunity to gather as a faith community on their unceded ancestral lands. As a Unitarian Universalist community, we celebrate religious diversity and welcome all who journey in search of faith and spirituality. The UUCC is a lay-led congregation run by the democratic process. We invite speakers from different religious traditions and spiritual or scientific backgrounds to speak at our pulpit. We encourage presentations covering a variety of topics and areas of interest to our community that connect with the UU7 principles. Today's service centers around the third principle. We affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Spiritual growth isn't about a vertical ascent to heaven, but about growth in every dimension at once. It's spirituality in 3D. Growth in spirit doesn't measure one's proximity to a God above, but rather the spaciousness of one's own soul, its volume, its capacity, its size. We need souls that can take in the world in all its complexity and diversity, yet still maintain our integrity. And we need souls that can love and be in relationship with all of this complexity. Instead of fight or flight, we need a spiritual posture of embrace. My name is Diane DeMarco, and I am your worship associate for this morning's service. And I would like to extend a special welcome to today's guests and visitors. We're glad you've joined us this morning. If you are not on the mailing list, please visit the UUCC website at www.uuccambria.org so that we can keep you informed about all of our activities. And please check out What's Happening, a weekly e-blast sent to all members and friends. This is a great way to keep up with the latest news in the community. And a reminder, if you wish to see this or any of the past Zoom services again, recordings of these services can be found on the UUCC website and Facebook as well. The membership committee invites non-members to consider joining our community. Please contact me or a person on the board if you're interested. Thank you. So again, good morning and welcome. The affirmation is both a recognition of the nature of this community as well as a promise we make and aspire to. Let us now sing the affirmation.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help, and to help, and to help one another.
We set aside this time for any short announcements that would be of interest to our UU community members and friends. Please keep your items short and to the point. For any items that need more explanation, please call or email the person after the service to be respectful of everyone's time. If you have an announcement, please raise your hand, and when Andy or I call your name, please stand or unmute yourself and then speak. Do we have any here? Yes, Dolores. Sure.
So we're thinking of doing a game day, like either monthly or twice a month during the week, so for all of you that have nothing to do and want to socialize with us. And so if you can keep the games that you have that you think are fun to play in a couple of hours, save them and let me know, and then we'll get a box together of games here at the sanctuary, or whatever we call this. Okay.
Jan.
Yeah, I just wanted to read one more letter. This will be the last. We've gotten 10 letters from our scholarship students, but I wanted to read one more. Dear Unitarian Universalist Community of Cambria, I would like to start off by saying how amazing your kindness is. You are very impactful towards not only community growth, but individual growth as well. I cannot express the extent of my gratefulness to you. Your help is tremendously thanked. I am so thankful to you for helping me with my education. I would not have been able to fulfill university requirements without you. So truly, thank you. That's from Jana Aldefai.
Thank you, Jan. Andy, were you gonna step up or?
I'll just come to you from the AV booth here to remind everyone that tomorrow morning, the men's group meets at 10 a.m., both in the sanctuary and on Zoom. And then Thursday morning here at the sanctuary, we'll continue with our 10 a.m. meditation circle. That's Thursday mornings. All are invited. Thank you. And right now, Diane, I don't see any hands raised by our Zoom participants. So I guess we're good out there. Back to you.
Thank you, Andy. Next week, Dr. Stephen Schwalbe from Oak Harbor, Washington, will present Countries and Groups Killing for God. We take this time to celebrate all those who are having a birthday this month. Birthdays are special, a day when we celebrate your entry into this world and honor your existence. If you have a birthday this month, please raise your hand. And when Andy or I call your name, please reveal yourself and your special date. Oh, I think we have someone here who is having a birthday. I can't imagine.
Hello, I'm having a birthday. Well, the French are celebrating my birthday on Bastille Day, July 14th. Be there.
Do we have anybody in Zoom land for birthdays?
Well, July was a quiet month. I don't see any hands raised.
Wow. Okay. Uh-oh, wait. No way.
It's a trick for you. It's a trick for that little Randy.
Uh-oh, wait. You're gonna have your birthday. One way or another.
Trick candle. Anybody deserves it.
Yay.
Thank you, Diane.
This birthday candle honors all the friends and family members of this community who are also celebrating birthdays this month. Thank you, Mary. Sharing together some of our personal and significant joys and concerns brings us closer as a faith community. We invite you to share the milestones that are deeply felt as part of your personal life, along with expressions of gratitude or acknowledgement. But please be mindful and considerate of all who come to worship with us this morning. This is a time of community building. The collective flames of these candles embody all the joys and sorrows which may have gone unspoken today, but are deeply felt in this community. The first reading is an excerpt from Community Means Strength by Starhawk. We are all longing to go home to some place we have never been, a place half remembered and half envisioned, we can only catch glimpses of from time to time, community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us. Eyes will light up as we enter. Voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter, a circle of healing, a circle of friends, and some place where we can be free. Meditation has the power to bring us closer together at the level of the soul and help us comprehend the universal oneness of all creation. Take a moment and be with the power of silence and unity together. Let us enter the silence and the stillness. May today there be peace within. May you trust your highest power that you are exactly where you are meant to be. May you use those gifts that you have received and pass on the love that has been given to you. Amen. The second reading is an excerpt from One Day at a Time by Joe Walsh. One day at a time. I was always the first to arrive at the party and the last to leave the scene of the crime. Well, it started with a couple of beers and it went, I don't know how many years, like a runaway train headed for the end of the line. I finally got around to admit that I might have a problem, but I thought it was just too damn big of a mountain to climb. Well, I got down on my knees and said, hey, I just can't go on living this way. Guess I have to learn to live my life one day at a time. Oh yeah, one day at a time. Oh yeah, one day at a time. I finally got around to admit that I was the problem when I used to put the blame on everybody else's shoulders but mine. All the friends I used to run with are gone. Lord, I hadn't planned on living this long, but I finally learned to live my life one day at a time. It was something it was too blind to see. I got help from something greater than me, and today I learned to live my life one day at a time. Oh yeah, one day at a time. Oh yeah. One day at a time. Please stand if you are able and sing Wake Now My Senses, number 298 in the hymnal.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in awe. Keep with the gift of creation your vow, giving, receiving as love shows.
seated. Today's sermon is titled Navigating a 12-Step Recovery Journey, Moving Back to Spirituality, to be delivered by Bob Kocher. Bob began his journey in recovery from addiction in 1988 after a life-ending choice was thwarted by a sleepwalking 3-year-old child in a ski rental home. He became part of a 12-step recovery process, mostly because he had nowhere left to turn. He began to follow mentoring from people living spiritually based lives and replaced bars with workshops, seminars, and family of origin work in therapy. In 1993, he opened In This Life, a travel company dedicated to providing workshops, retreats, and seminars on cruise ships, which he still operates today. In the mid-90s, he began to share his experience of recovery at similar conferences and seminars that had taught him a new way of thinking and living. He has led workshops on dealing with drastic change, relationships, intimacy, how the 12-step process works, and others. He has a passion for travel and sports and shares his life with beautiful partner Beth and beautiful dog Maddie, a black-mouthed cur. Now, Bob Kocher.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Diane. And I first want to thank everybody responsible for inviting me here today. It's always an honor for me to share about recovery and a journey back to a new life, which, as Diane mentioned, I almost had extinguished because I decided to end my life, as addiction had me in the complete grips of insanity from the age of about 13 years up till when I got sober at 41. And I have been sober 34 years, clean and sober 34 years, and now really, really am vested in the recovery community and in the life of recovery. So it's really a joy to share about this. Now, I was sitting with Beth and just taking in the environment here. When I came to the rehearsal here yesterday, I just felt at home. It was absolutely wonderful, the environment, the way that people were speaking, the warm welcome and connection that I felt with everybody here. And this is really what recovery is all about. Up here, we have a circle with a demonstration of different backgrounds of faith. And in the Alcoholics Anonymous program, for example, there is a circle and a triangle. And the triangle inside of the circle represents unity, service, and recovery. So it's very similar to an environment like we have here, which is focused on connection, and I could feel that right away when I came in. So I'm taking this in and sitting there and sort of leaning on Beth a little bit for some energy, and I looked down and both of my shoelaces were untied. Now, this was my experience a lot when I was out there drinking and using. I used to fall on my face a lot, and I didn't need to have my shoelaces untied to do it. But it was par for the course, so I laughed and I reached down and I tied my shoelaces, and I'm grateful that I didn't have to take a face plant coming up to the podium, and so here we are. Addiction is a subtle foe. There are over 125 12-step programs that are active in the world right now. Some of the main ones that many of us may have dealt with ourselves, of course, alcohol, drugs, food, sugar, sexual obsession, anxiety. The list goes on and on. And the closest way that I can describe the addictive process is that in my experience, and I speak only for myself, I'm not representing anyone except me, I found out that addiction was what took me away from being present. And for me, that happened very early in childhood. So I said that addiction started for me at 13 and a half. It actually could have started when I was 2 or 3, because in my family, we mainlined sugar. And of course, alcohol has high volumes of sugar in it. So that fed my desire to be involved with it, but not as much as my desire to make the world make sense. It's interesting that when I got sober, the scientific community generally recognized that addiction was about 85% biochemical. Now it's exactly the opposite. The psychology behind the disease and things that happen in our culture are manifesting now in ways that it's much easier to recognize, even to the point where mutations are happening and have a connection with the biochemistry of addiction. So what happened with me when I came into the program was I knew from the standpoint of my dependence on alcohol and drugs, that it was the only way that the world made sense to me. I had developed from childhood that included 11 moves by the time I was 12 years of age. My parents were married and divorced, then they remarried each other, and then they divorced again, both times after first I was born and then my sister Carol was born. So for children in the addiction environment, it's easy to see how if you're dependent upon a higher power, which would be your parents, and families are not together and integrated and full of community, that there can be disturbance in childhood. So in the addiction field today, there's a lot more movement into how this affects people in their processes in life. This shows up in all different kinds of ways: food, smoking, alcohol, and drugs, of course. I did everything. I was what they call in the program a garbage can addict. If it was there, I took it, and I wanted more. And the more that I took, the better I would feel for a short period of time. And recovery from the disease of addiction is generally based upon the fact that first you're having fun, then not fun plus problems, and eventually nothing but problems. And that was the story of my life. I was grabbing for a Kleenex and wiped my eyes several times when Diane was saying the one day at a time long version, because that's exactly what it is. I finally identified the fact that I was powerless over everything in my life. And it was all connected to the alcohol and drugs that I consumed on a daily basis. I hid my addiction very well. About half of the people that I knew in life were astonished that I needed to come into 12-step recovery. And the other half were going, oh, wow, I'm so glad he made it. So it is a disease that creates a lack of connection. It's a disease that tells you don't have it. And it is a disease that will push people to try to figure out on their own a way to be able to make life manageable. And it's just not possible. Diane, you mentioned the third, was it a concept? Third principle. So to go on now, I want to talk about the spirituality of recovery and what happened to me when I came from a position of despair and got into recovery. Many of you may know about the 12 steps. I won't repeat them all now, but I will repeat the third one because it's pertinent to the discussion today. And the third step says, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. There's a fallacy about 12-step programming in many areas of the world that it is a cult or it is a religious-based organization. Of course, there are people that are very religious that are within the 12-step programs, but the one important ingredient, which the founders, I think, got really right when they wrote the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the basis of discussing the 12 steps and sharing stories and helps and assists people in AA and getting into recovery, is that this concept was we are not going to define anybody's higher power. It's up to you to define it. And there are many agnostics and atheists within the 12-step recovery community. They lean on each other as a group of dependents, group of drunks, gathering of dependents. If one is not able to formulate a more traditional or personal concept with a higher power. And I like that a lot. It really enables people that join to have a greater sense of being able to be still an individual, yet connected to something that is in the greater good for each other. So I'll say just a little bit about how I came to 12-step recovery. I owned a light manufacturing and wholesale distribution company, and I made freshly squeezed juices and competed with Odwalla and Hanson's and Naked Juice and companies like that. And I was actually so far down the ladder in those days that I was pre-selling my product for less money than it cost me to make it to drive my cocaine habit and my alcohol habit. I was burning money like crazy. I owed the Italian produce community in South San Francisco $25,000, which is a lot of money today, but it was a whale of a lot of money in 1988. And I'd lost a lawsuit because I'd created an accident and a young person had a slight fracture in a leg because my vehicle had run into him. I hadn't been present enough in my day-to-day activity to pull the emergency brake, and my vehicle rolled back and impacted this young man's leg. That was a $50,000 bill. I was on the hook for about $3,500 to my drug dealer, and I had no money in the bank, not even to pay my next rent. The only thing that I could see that was possible to happen was to leave the planet. And I was going up to be with several people, and I was having psychotic episodes where I was hearing voices. They wouldn't go away. And no matter how much I drank and used in this last run, as we call it, up in Lake Tahoe, I couldn't quiet the voices. And I was going to be just fine with ending my life. And on the morning I was to do this, about 3 a.m., in a 3,500 square foot home where I was in a corner and all of the bedrooms were in the back of the house, a sleepwalking 3-year-old child walked somehow through the house and into the room where I was and crawled up underneath a small Afghan I had, put his arms around my neck and lay me back down on the couch. And when I woke up in the morning, my sister's voice was echoing in my head, and she had been in 12-step recovery for 10 years. And I thought, just maybe I'll give this a chance. I really didn't think that whatever God could or might be wanted to have anything to do with me. And a few days later, I happened to interact with a young man who I had coached in high school. I did have a 7-year coaching career, and he looked completely different to me. And on this Tuesday night of February 16th, 1988, I met with him and I asked him what he'd been doing because he facially looked so vastly different. And he said, I've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for 2 years. So I called my sister and went to a meeting. And when I went into the meeting, and the reason I was tearing up today when Diane was talking and reading about One Day at a Time was I felt precisely that same sense of connection in that first meeting that I went to. It gave me a modicum of hope. And all of us, at one way or another, whether it's an uncle, a distant cousin, a friend, we are connected as a society to addiction in some way or another. And the most important thing whenever I'm sharing about my journey in recovery that I can say is, I knew I had a problem for 10 years before I came. And I pushed and pushed and pushed to say, I can handle this on my own. And that is the greatest fallacy in the world, not just to addicts, but to other human beings. I love the fact that there was a care and concern about our country today. We live in an addicted society. We're addicted to conflict. We're addicted to violence. We're addicted to separation. Excuse me. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And it's wonderful when each and every one of us can do that part for our addiction to say, I'm not going to be a participant today, and I'm going to spread some good today somewhere. This is also the principle of recovery in all the 12-step programs. Once we get in, we're in community. So walking back to this February 16th evening, I was out in the front yard of my home, and I did what I usually did, which was to go into the house, come back out to talk to my friend, this AA member, and I had a beer. And I cracked open the beer and I put it up to my lips, and I don't know what battery acid tastes like because I've never tasted battery acid, but I'll tell you that beer burned in my mouth to the point where I spit it out. And the door opened and one of my roommates came out and he handed me a joint, and I put the joint up to my lips. And I don't know what smoking a highway flare would be like, but I can tell you that that joint burned my mouth. And I just turned and handed it back, and I was feeling emotional. And a couple of minutes later, I said goodbye to my friend, and I walked into the house, and I was walking down a corridor to go to my bedroom, and I said this, God, help me. I can't do this to myself anymore. Now, I had been praying for years. God, if you bail me out of this, I'm going to do this. God, if you only do this for me, I'm going to take care of this. And you know what? I got bailed out a lot. This time, all I said was, God, help me, and I meant it. I went into my bedroom and I lay down on my bed, and as if my fingers had snapped, it was morning. And I was looking out of my window, and there was a bird sitting on a branch in the tree, looking in, just chirping, as if it was speaking to me. I had no sense of spirituality. I didn't understand that even as an addict, going through the things that all of you who may have had addiction problems yourself know that we do. I didn't think that God would want anything to do with me if there was a God. I wasn't even sure about what kind of concept of God I had, because in my religious upbringing, what I heard about in church was not matched in the family. So higher power was very scary to me, and scary to a lot of people that come into 12-step recovery. All I knew was something was different. And at that moment, not only was there hope and possibility, I could not know that this was the beginning for me to open my ears, open my eyes, open my heart to different possibilities. And when I went into that AA meeting on Sunday, the 20th of February, the speaker that came to the podium that day announced himself and said the topic of the meeting today is fear. And it's probably the only thing I could have listened to, because my mind was still churning away. And he talked about the realities of fears in his own life. And then people came forward to the podium and they talked about their fears, and they talked about solutions to things. I didn't know about solutions. Maybe intellectually I knew, but it wasn't a concept I could grasp, because by the time an addict reaches the problem stage, from going from fun to fun plus problems to nothing but problems, there aren't many solutions available except to surrender. So the journey of the 12 steps is first surrendering to the powerlessness. The second part is communicating with each other. 12-step programs encourage sponsorship. A sponsor can become a higher power without the dependence on a higher power. I don't make my sponsor, nor do I allow people that I sponsor to count on me as an authority, except from the standpoint of experience. A higher power is the group and the consciousness and the effort of each other to bring together the fact that we are okay as people, no matter what path we've been down. The words that I've spoken about my own turmoil leading up to recovery, I'm well down in the percentile range with what people deal with when they come in for addiction. But it is all centered in our minds. If I feel that I'm not worthy, or if I feel that I have no hope, or if I feel that I can't move forward, it's harder for me to get connected to that path, which all of you teach each other that I can be a part of and tap into. To suit up, show up, pay attention, to tell the truth as best as I can, and then leave the results up to my higher power, instead of driving the energy on my own as if I have the answers. I can learn solutions, but I don't have the answers. And also, I want to say something important about the spiritual journey for me was to get connected to therapy. Early in recovery, I would hear people come up to the podium when they were sharing, and they would say things like, well, I decided to see a psychiatrist, or I made an appointment with a psychotherapist. And I would sit out there thinking to myself, that's really great. Wow, that's great. I'm so glad you need it. I don't need it, but I'm glad for you. So in my sobriety, I've had several cycles where the things that life deals have created problems. I was sailing along in recovery, and I had my company go out of business. Well, I happened to be in Greece at the time on my first trip overseas, and a person shut down this light manufacturing and wholesale distribution company that I owned. And the woman of my dreams at that time decided that relationships were too scary. And I was by myself in a country far away, nothing to lean on, no meetings to go to. And my 12-step recovery process brought me back. And that opened the door for what I do today, a business of 34 years that's allowed me to share with people joys all over the world. And I was locked into that. I was in an addiction within my recovery, which can happen a lot for us, because once we solve one thing, there are lots of other things waiting to get us into the process. So therapy all of a sudden became very important to me. That which I did not need, I needed. And I was in therapy for a while, and then I was on a roll, and then all of a sudden I needed it again. And then I met Beth. And when we got together, both of us had come from addicted family backgrounds. So we're bringing this process together to try to have a relationship. And what we decided to do was to come and work through problems that were potential so that we could keep a commitment. And I'm so glad we did that. So the whole recovery community is about uncover, discover, and discard that which is not useful. And that is the sum total of the process. The more I discard that which blocks me from a relationship with God as I don't understand God but have faith in, the more I am open to playing the cards that I'm dealt in life and using the tools that I have to accept that that's the hand I'm dealt and move forward with it. I could never have imagined the kind of love that's available in the world if I hadn't gotten sober, clean and sober. Could not have imagined it. My higher power was everything that took me away from the higher power that could help me. And so I'm going to close just by saying that if you know of anybody that has a problem, if you feel like you have a problem, it's okay. There are solutions, and you can reach out, and there's help available in the community. 12-step recovery is a really good resource, and there are many more. This church, this community is a resource. All kinds of resources. I feel so blessed and honored to have been asked to share today, and I hope that whatever I've had to say helps with any kind of connection that you would want to make, and that you have just a terrific rest of the day, one day at a time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. That was wonderful. The morning offering will now be given and received. Please remember, we are a self-sustaining congregation and provide all financial resources for our many ministries. We recognize the spiritual value of generosity and invite you to participate. If you are viewing the service remotely, please use one of the methods shown on the screen. Thank you. Beautiful, Jen. Our thanks for all the gifts given and received and for the work of this community. Now, let us sing the doxology.
From all that dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Their beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land by every tongue.
Please stand if you are able and sing the closing hymn, We Would Be One, number 318.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love. that light cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow, a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
Please be seated. Let us now recite the valediction. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with this message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. Please extinguish your chalice at home now. After the benediction, we encourage you to stay for questions and comments. Please click on the gallery view button in the upper right corner of your screen, but please remain muted. Andy or I will call on you when you raise your hand. Bob will give us our benediction.
Let's take a brief moment of silence and I'll say a prayer of connection for all of us. Oh, yes, that. Take our will in our lives, guide us on our journeys, show us how to live. Higher power, may the universe bless you and keep you. May the universe lift into the light and protect you. May the universe lighten you and teach you to share your gifts with the world. Amen.